It was a Friday night in Austin, Texas, back in December of 1991. If you were there, you'd know that Austin felt a lot smaller then. It was a place where weird just meant local art and late-night music, not the kind of darkness that stays with a city for decades. At a little shopping center on Anderson Lane, there was a shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. It was bright, it was clean, and it was the kind of place where parents felt perfectly fine letting their teenage daughters work the late shift. On this particular night, 4 girls were finishing up: Jennifer Harbison, who was 17, and her younger sister Sarah, who was only 15. They were working with their friends, Eliza Thomas, 17, and Amy Ayers, who was just 13. They were just kids. They were cleaning the machines, laughing, probably talking about their plans for the weekend. They were thinking about high school, about boyfriends, about what they were going to do on Saturday morning. They were talking about the Christmas parade. They were worrying about exams. These were the mundane, beautiful thoughts of youth. At 11 p.m., they locked the front door. They were doing their closing chores, mopping the floors, wiping down the machines, counting the small pile of cash in the register. They were just minutes away from jumping into their cars and heading home to safety. But they never made it to the parking lot. Just past midnight, a police officer on patrol noticed smoke. Not just a little bit of smoke, a thick, black, oily cloud rising from the yogurt shop, swirling into the cold Texas sky. When the fire department broke down the doors to put out the blaze, they expected to find a grease fire or an electrical short. Instead, they found a nightmare that would haunt the state of Texas for the next 35 years. Deep in the back of the shop, they found the 4 girls. It wasn't the fire that had killed them. The fire had been set intentionally with an accelerant to hide the evidence of a brutal, unspeakable crime. The scene was so chaotic, so damaged by the heat and the water from the fire hoses, that investigators feared the truth might have already turned to ash. Now, for years, the Austin Police Department was under massive, crushing pressure. This was the crime that stole the city's innocence. Every parent in Austin looked at their child with fear. Every time a teenager was late coming home, a family held its breath. They chased thousands of leads. They interviewed over 3,000 people. They traveled across the country following tips that led to dead ends. They looked at drifters, they looked at locals, they looked at everyone. But nothing stuck. The case went cold. The shop was eventually demolished, but the ghosts remained on Anderson Lane. The year is now 1999. 8 years have passed since that black smoke rose over Anderson Lane. 8 years of silence. 8 years of families waiting for a phone call that never came. The police were under a mountain of pressure that you and I can't even begin to imagine. In the world of law enforcement, an 8-year-old cold case is a heavy stone around your neck. It's a career killer. It's a constant reminder of failure. They needed a win. They needed to tell the city that the monsters were finally behind bars. They needed the headlines to change. And that is when they set their sights on 4 young men from the area: Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Joseph Harbison. Now, I want you to close your eyes and imagine being 20 years old. You're just starting your life. You have memories of that night in 1991, sure, everyone in town does. But suddenly, you find yourself being pulled into a room that feels like it's shrinking every second you're in it. The walls are that sickly, off-white color that only exists in police stations, stained by years of cigarette smoke and desperation. There are no windows. There is no clock. There is no sense of time passing. Is it 2 a.m.? Is it Tuesday? You don't know. There is only a metal table, 2 hard chairs, and the smell of stale coffee and fear. This was the reality for Robert Springsteen. He was taken into an interrogation room and kept there for hours. Then those hours turned into days. Imagine the exhaustion. Imagine being kept awake until the words start to blur together. Your mind starts to play tricks on you. The detectives aren't just asking questions anymore, they are telling you a story. They are narrating your life to you. They aren't looking for the truth, they are looking for a confession that fits the theory they've already built in their heads. They need the puzzle pieces to fit, even if they have to trim the edges with a knife. They say, "Robert, we know you were there. We have the evidence. We have witnesses who saw your car." They say, "Michael already told us everything. He's the one who's going to walk away clean because he talked first. He's pointing the finger at you, Robert. He's calling you the leader. Do you want to be the only one who goes to the chair? Do you want to die for a secret Michael is already telling to save his own skin?" This is what we call the pressure cooker. The detectives used a psychological funnel, slowly stripping away Robert's sense of reality. When you are tired enough, when you are scared enough, you will say anything to make the noise stop. You will agree to anything just to be allowed to close your eyes and sleep for 5 minutes. And eventually, after being pushed to the very edge of his sanity, Robert began to repeat the story they were feeding him. He began to believe their fiction was his memory. The confession he gave was a complete mess. It was a disaster of contradictions. He got the names of the victims wrong. He couldn't describe the layout of the shop correctly. He didn't know how the fire started or what kind of lighter was used. In a normal world, an investigator would look at that confession and realize this person wasn't there, that he was just a scared kid reciting a script. But this wasn't a normal world. This was a world that was hungry for a conviction. Austin wanted blood for blood. In 2001, the trial began. The prosecution didn't have a single drop of blood. Not a single strand of hair. No fingerprints. No witnesses who could place these boys at the shop that night. No physical bridge between the suspects and the victims. All they had were those broken, coerced words. And in Texas, back then, that was enough. Robert Springsteen was sentenced to death. Michael Scott was given life. As they were led away in chains, the families of the victims cried in the gallery. They thought they had peace. They thought the nightmare was over. They thought the justice system had worked. But the true horror was just beginning to fester. Because while Robert was sitting on death row, watching the clock tick down toward his execution, counting the days until the state would end his life for a crime he didn't commit, the real killer was out there. Maybe he was in Austin. Maybe he was driving past that very courthouse, listening to the radio, smiling to himself at the sheer incompetence of it all. He had watched the legal system do his work for him. He had watched the police kidnap 2 innocent lives to cover up for the 4 lives he had taken. He was free, protected by the very people who were supposed to catch him. For 27 years, these men sat in a cage. They watched through tiny barred windows as the world changed. They saw the internet be born. They saw the rise of smartphones and social media. They saw the world get faster, while they remained frozen in time. They saw their parents pass away through glass partitions, unable to ever hold them again or say a final goodbye without a guard watching. All while the strange, dark, and mysterious truth was buried in a cardboard box in an evidence locker, waiting for the technology of 2026 to finally catch up. Fast forward to right now. Mid-2026. Science has a way of refusing to give up, even when the human heart has grown weary. In the early months of 2026, the Texas Department of Public Safety received a grant to use a brand new technology called AI-enhanced genetic scaffolding. This isn't the DNA testing you know from the 2000s or even the 2010s. This is something far more advanced, a digital resurrection of forensic truth. Back in 1991, they found a tiny, microscopic sample of DNA on the clothing of one of the girls. But it was degraded. It had been damaged by the intense heat of the fire and the chemicals from the fire hoses. For decades, every lab in the country said it was unusable. They said the genetic map was gone. But in 2026, we don't need a perfect sample anymore. Our AI can take the fragments of that genetic code, the broken pieces, and use complex algorithms to fill in the missing gaps, reconstructing the donor's entire profile with terrifying, undeniable accuracy. In February 2026, a forensic technician, someone who wasn't even born when the fire happened, ran that rebuilt code through the national database. The computer didn't stutter. It didn't give a partial match or a likelihood. It hit a bullseye. But the name that popped up on the screen didn't belong to a career criminal. It didn't belong to a drifter or anyone already in the system. It belonged to a man in his late 50s living in a quiet, tree-lined suburb in Ohio. Let's call him the neighbor. He owned a small landscaping business. He was a regular at his local church. He was a donor to local charities. He was the guy you'd trust to watch your house while you went on vacation. He was, by all accounts, a pillar of his community. But when the FBI and Texas Rangers raided his home in March 2026, they didn't just find a killer. They found something that makes this story one of the most disturbing cases in the history of true crime. They found a digital archive of a man who had never truly left that yogurt shop in 1991. Inside his home, they found a dedicated computer room. And on that computer, they found that this man had been living a double life for over 20 years. He wasn't just hiding from the law, he was obsessed with the fact that he had gotten away with it. Under the username AustinGhost91, he had become a legendary figure in online true crime communities. He wasn't just a reader, he was a super user. He had spent thousands of hours discussing the yogurt shop murders with amateur detectives, podcast hosts, and journalists. He would post things like, "I've studied this case for years, and I truly believe the police got the wrong guys. The real killer was probably much smarter than they think." He would offer theories that were actually hidden confessions. He would describe the feeling of the crime scene with a detail that people thought was just insightful. He enjoyed the power of knowing the truth while watching the rest of the world argue over lies. He watched as Robert Springsteen was led to death row, and he sat at his keyboard and typed, "Another tragedy in a long line of tragedies. My heart goes out to the families." He enjoyed the irony. He loved being the expert on the very tragedy he created. He wasn't just a murderer, he was a voyeur of his own chaos, hiding in the very crowd that was screaming for his head. He was mocking us for 35 years, and he was doing it right in front of our faces. When the authorities finally brought him back to Austin in April 2026, he didn't put up a fight. He didn't cry or scream. He looked at the detectives, men who were using technology he couldn't have imagined in 1991, and he reportedly said, "I knew the machines would eventually catch up to me. I just didn't think it would take this long. I thought I had outrun the future." As we sit here today, in the middle of 2026, the legal system is trying to clean up the wreckage of its own making. Robert and Michael are finally, officially free. They walked out of the courthouse as free men for the first time in their adult lives. But as they stood in the Texas sun, squinting at a world they no longer recognized, they realized the true cost. They went into prison as teenagers with their whole lives ahead of them. They came out as grandfathers with their health failing and their families gone. They missed the entire digital revolution. They missed the chance to ever be young, to fall in love, to build a career. The DNA technology of 2026 gave us a name. It gave us a face. It gave us a conviction that should have happened decades ago. But it can't give back the 35 years that were stolen from two innocent men. 35 years of birthdays, of holidays, of simply being alive, all gone because of a forced confession and a fire meant to hide the truth. The next time you're scrolling through a forum, or you're chatting with a stranger online about a mystery that fascinates you, just remember Austin Ghost 91. Sometimes, the person most interested in finding the truth is the one who is buried deepest beneath it. Because in the dark, mysterious world we live in, the monster isn't always hiding in the woods. Sometimes, he's right there in the comments section, typing along with you, waiting for you to like his post.